After thinking a while, Andreas then decided on what he had to do and told Jester that he would accept that proposal. Then after their conversation was over, Andreas gave the magic item back to Luna and pointed out that with everything done there was no more reason for them to fight and asked Luna if there was. Meanwhile, Luna just looked down on the ground, clenching her fists tightly. Instantly, Luna looked towards Andreas with excitement as her eyes filled with joy, while Andreas was puzzled trying to comprehend what Luna was doing and questioned himself what was up with her. Luna then, without any hesitation, jumped to hug Andreas as she began to laugh, stating how happy Luna was. Meanwhile, Andreas was taken aback by the sudden hug he had not expected at all. Luna then continued to hug Andreas and told him that it was the first time Luna had some of her own age in the congregation, to which Andreas with a look of concern began to wonder how she was trying to just kill him a minute ago. Luna then maintained her composure and told Andreas that as his senior, Luna would give him some advice, which was that being part of the congregation probably won't make him any busier. Meanwhile, Andreas just stood there listening to Luna talk. Andreas then responded saying, "Oh, I see." So apart from expectational situations, all he had to do was report on what was happening at the academy, right? To which Luna, putting her hand on Andreas' shoulder, told him, yeah, that was right, and furthermore, if he had any problems, he could just talk to Luna. Andreas then, bowing his head, told Luna that he would be sure to say hello if he met her somewhere in the future, and tried to leave the saying, but was immediately interrupted by Luna, who exclaimed, as she planned to come along with him. Andreas then responded to Luna, stating that he was not here for the congregation's matters, but was suddenly interrupted by Luna, who told him that she didn't mind about it. Andreas then, with an annoyed expression, stared at her and questioned if her head was full of flowers. Andreas then told her that this was the first time they had spoken and that he didn't understand why she wanted to come with him, while in the back of his mind he thought how he had to get her off his tail somehow. Meanwhile, Luna responded, stating that she had no better things to do back home. Hearing what Luna just said, Andreas simply told her that it was not really a reason though, to which Luna just asked him if that wasn't a reason enough. Luna then, with an excited expression, began reminiscing about the first time she saw Andreas and told him that when Luna saw him going nuts at the congregation before, she thought it was awesome. So Luna thought it would be a blast to stick around him. Luna then began mocking Andreas by acting like he did back then and said, "If you want the sloth, give me all your treasures before I die." Meanwhile, Andreas, witnessing all this, began to wonder if she was picking a fight with him. Annoyed by her actions, Andreas instantly turned around and began to walk away, telling her, "I think I'll just go by myself," to which Luna immediately grabbed Andreas's cape and told him to wait, then exclaiming, "Come on," she told him to let Luna come with him. But that was not enough for Andreas to let her come. So Luna then, with a panicked expression, pointed out that Luna might be helpful to him in some way. Furthermore, she told him that Luna was crazy strong, which made Andreas stop. Andreas then turned towards Luna and began wondering how it certainly was tempting to have someone as strong as Luna around, especially with impending battle with the Orcs, and since there were no hostilities or laws against black mages in that region, it wouldn't be a problem for them to be together. So Andreas exclaimed, "All right," but told her that he had one condition for her, which immediately startled Luna, making her question what it was. As Luna stared at Andreas, he immediately told Luna that he wanted her to do the soul engraving for him, which shocked Luna, who had not expected him to say such a thing. Luna then, trying to avoid Andreas' gaze, told him, but that was a real pain to do, to which Andreas simply told her that her coming along with him was also a pain. Andreas then, staring at Luna, thought how the skill soul engraving could give him a permanent spirit seance buff effect. Furthermore, in the deadly sins, it was a special skill that only Luna could use. So as long as he could get it, it would be worth being around her, even if it was a pain. Meanwhile, Luna, with a worried look, just kept wondering as to what she should do. Then immediately pointing her finger towards Andreas, Luna called him Andreas Cromwell and told him that she also had a condition for him, to which Andreas just simply questioned her what. Luna, then full of excitement, proudly placed her hand above her chest and told Andreas to become Luna's friend. In response, Andreas just asked her why. Luna then told him that if they were friends, then being together would not be a pain. Furthermore, Luna would do the soul engraving for her friend even if it was a huge pain. Meanwhile, Andreas just stared at her in shock as he wondered how that was some weird reasoning, but instantly decided that he would gladly do it if it meant she would do the soul engraving for him. So, closing his eyes as a polite gesture, Andreas exclaimed, "Very well," and told Luna, "Let's be friends." Hearing Andreas say that instantly made Luna so happy and excited that she began jumping as she couldn't contain her joy. As Luna kept jumping in excitement, she exclaimed yay as she had become friends with Andreas. Meanwhile, Andreas, who was just standing still, wondered how, although this was outside the Empire, it would still be a problem if someone saw him with her. So, trying to maintain his composure, Andreas asked, "And Luna? Could you call me Buddy instead of my name from now on?" Hearing which made Luna immediately question Andreas, why. Then trying to avoid Luna's gaze, Andreas, with sweat dripping from his face, wondered how he should trick her and told her that way it sounds closer and asked her what she thought. Then Luna, who was clueless of Andreas's plan, immediately trusted him and pointing her finger at him told him, "Got it, Buddy." Andreas, then witnessing Luna's excitement, thought how it made her that happy and exclaimed, "Thank goodness, as she was so simple." 3 days later on the Endeavor stronghold, an intense battle between the soldiers and the orcs were commencing on full force, where both sides looked fierce as they slaughtered one another. Amidst the chaos, a fierce warrior was relentlessly attacking the orcs with all his might. Even the huge orcs looked wary of him, as they were no match for brute force. Instantly, the fierce warrior, slashing the orc in two, has displayed unparalleled power, as he was the head of the Endeavor house, Dawson Endeavor. Then, acting as the commander of the battlefield, Dawson kept swinging his axe and killing the orcs along with his soldiers, who also displayed bravery as they stabbed the orcs. Suddenly, one of the orcs blew a loud bone horn, instantly grabbing everyone's attention. The sudden sound of the horn could be heard all around the battlefield, which caught the attention of Commander Dawson and his soldiers as they tried to comprehend what could mean. At the same time, all the orcs that were around also heard the sound of the horn and immediately knew what it meant. Instantly, all the orcs on the battlefield began to retreat, running away at an incredibly fast pace, which puzzled all of the soldiers along with Commander Dawson. The commander then cursed them, "Damned orcs," and questioned if they were trying to chip their strength away little by little. But suddenly one of his subordinates came rushing, and he called out to the commander, yelling, "Sir." Then the subordinate immediately informed the commander that the reinforcements from Biotra's fortifications had arrived, which instantly shocked the commander, making him turn towards the subordinate. Commander Dawson then, with a slight smile, pointed out that it was good to hear and asked his subordinate how many troops he had sent, to which the subordinate hesitatingly told him about that. He then told him that there were only 2 people, which immediately puzzled Commander Dawson, making him question his subordinate, saying, "What?" The commander then immediately yelled how even 2,000 troops wouldn't be enough, yet knowing all that, he questioned if they only sent 2 and asked if that was a joke, to which the subordinate told him that he had tried contacting the kingdom about it, but they hadn't responded yet. The subordinate then told him that fortunately it seems that one of them was Luna Pendragon, the black mage who was said to be on par with an aura master, which instantly made him question why someone like that would be in that remote place. The subordinate then responded, stating that he did not have an answer to that, while Commander exclaimed shame and pointed out that it would be better if it was a necromancer instead. Commander Dawson then asked his subordinate about the other one. In response, his subordinate just told him that he was a wandering mercenary called Barry Sanders. Commander Dawson then tried to recall if he had even heard that name, but then claimed that he had never heard of him before. After the subordinate's reporting was completed, Commander Dawson responded very well, and then as everyone returned to the castle, he ordered them to make preparations for dinner, as he would meet them himself. Then, as everyone began to leave the battlefield, the commander was still thinking about the name Barry Sanders. At the same time, inside the castle, Andreas was telling Luna that it wouldn't be a problem there, but it would be a problem if rumors spread that a noble of the Empire was a black mage, to which Luna immediately understood what he was saying and questioned him if he was going to wear that lame mask all the time. In response, Andreas told her that was right and claimed that one can never be too careful. Andreas then reached towards the huge door in front of them and exclaimed, "All right," telling her, "Let's go in." In response, Luna, agreeing to him, told Andreas how exciting it was. Simultaneously, as Andreas opened the door, Luna jumped in excitement, exclaiming "Yahoo!" and told them that they came to kill the Orc Lord. Meanwhile, Andreas, bowing his head, told them that his name was Barry Sanders, and with respect gave salutations to the Lordship of Endeavor. In response, the commander told them that he was Dawson Endeavor. Dawson then thanked them for coming and pointed out that if they did well in the battle, he would report back to the king and promised them a suitable reward. Meanwhile, looking at the huge commander, Luna was startled as she claimed how it was an orc. Then the vice commander also welcomed them as he introduced himself as Filian Endeavor, while commander requested them to please take a seat. Then, as everyone was seated and had their food served, Andreas got up from his seat and questioned the commander if could ask how the situation was. Commander Dawson then, with a serious expression, told him that, to put it bluntly, it was hopeless, then began to explain as they knew they don't even have enough men to hold them off, let alone mount a counterattack, and if the Orc Lord and its chieftains, who have been sitting on the sidelines, enter the fray, it would be the end of that stronghold. Then looking at Andreas, he claimed that with no support from the kingdom, it was only a matter of time before they fell, to which Andreas exclaimed how the situation was more dire than he thought. Meanwhile, Luna just kept munching down on the steak. Instantly, the commander, with an even more serious expression, pointed out that what was really dire was something else. Namely, it was Dawson. Then, reminiscing about the huge Orc Lord, told them that the leader of the enemy, the Orc Lord, was an Orc Master. Hearing this statement, Andreas was shocked as he opened his eyes wide open, while Luna, who was eating, also glanced towards Dawson and claimed that it sounded fun. Andreas, then glancing towards Luna, began to wonder about how the Orc Lord was an Orc Master and questioned himself if Luna could defeat it by herself. If he were to assist her, they might be able to do it, but then again, he knew that wars weren't always that simple. Suddenly, Luna claimed that Luna would take on the Orc Lord, which puzzled the commander. Luna then exclaimed that she had to finish that meat first, while Andreas thought how Luna's unpredictable character was also a worrying factor. Suddenly, a guard rushed inside the dinner hall where they were present and yelled "Sir," as there was an emergency, which puzzled Andreas along with everyone else. Then the vice commander, understanding the situation, quickly questioned the guard what it was and asked him to report immediately. Then the guard that came rushing in had his face dripping with sweat as he told them that just now below the walls, the Orc Lord had appeared. Hearing that report, Commander Dawson along with Andreas and Luna were dumbfounded, as they had not expected the Orc Lord to appear so suddenly. Then, without any delays, all of them rushed towards the castle walls, where one of the guards questioned what they were planning, as they were leaving their main force behind and coming there with only a few of its chieftains. While Commander Dawson, looking at them, pointed out that in any case everybody should stay on their guard, to which all of the soldiers responded with a yes. At the same time, the huge Orc Lord along with his chieftains stopped and fearlessly glanced towards the humans on the top of the wall like they were nothing. The Orc Lord then, with a cunning smile, yelled in a loud and scary voice, "Hear me, humans." Hearing the Orc Lord speaking in human language bewildered all of them, as they began to panic and questioned if the Orc could speak their language. Meanwhile, the Orc Lord continued and told them that all the attacks so far were just a drill to give his warriors a taste of what the battlefield is like, but now they are all ready. While all of them just stood there listening to the Orc Lord, suddenly Luca, putting her hand over her ears, yelled "yeah" as she felt like her ears were going to burst. The Orc Lord then, in his loud voice, told them that tomorrow at dawn, they would launch an all-out attack, while one of the soldiers, covering his ears in pain, questioned so after whittling down their forces, they were planning to finish them off. Then the Orc Lord, holding his huge sword, told them, but it would be too tasteless to end it like that. So, with the honor of that Al Ghud at stake, he would give him a chance. He then told them that if they won a one-on-one duel with his 6 warriors there, he would spare them a day. Hearing all that enraged Commander Dawson as he clenched his teeth in frustration and thought how they wanted to play with him before they killed them. Then one of the soldiers who was standing beside the vice commander pointed out that it was definitely a trap, as there was no way those orcs had any honor. Agreeing to him, the vice commander also exclaimed exactly and suggested that they kill them while they still had the chance with their main forces far away. He was sure they could do it. In response, Commander Dawson claimed that they were dealing with an Orc Master, while Andreas just stood beside the commander, listening to everything unfold. The commander, then looking at the main force from a distance, pointed out that even if they take them by surprise, it would be difficult to kill them before their main forces arrive. Instantly, the vice commander questioned him if he was going to take their deal, to which the commander simply responded by stating that if they can hold them off for even a day, they could still hope for reinforcements. Meanwhile, Andreas began to wonder how the problem was that the only ones who could fight them were him and Luna Pendragon. So, without any hesitation, Andreas asked the commander if he shall go down to them. Hearing the mercenaries say that, everyone along with the commander was left stunned, as they had not expected him to say such a thing, and quickly questioned him if he wanted to go. Meanwhile, Luna, who was also hearing Andreas say that, glanced at him, trying to comprehend his plans. Andreas then responded with a yes and requested him to please make one additional deal with the Orc Lord, which everyone immediately agreed to and opened the gate. Andreas, then calmly walking out the gate, thought about the Orc Lord and decided to take a closer look at its muck. Soon, Andreas got down and made his way towards the fearless warriors that he was about to fight. Abruptly, the Orc Lord, with joy in his face, yelled, "Great, let us begin." While one of the warriors, holding his weapon in his hand, was surprised that a guy like Andreas was about to fight the Orc warriors. Meanwhile, the commander, with nervousness in his eyes, exclaimed a fight for many, where the winner continued on to the next fight. He further stated that it was certainly beneficial to them given their lack of skilled fighters, but it meant their savior had to fight until he lost. Abruptly, the vice commander, in a state of shock, asked what he was thinking and if he came there to die for Endeavor. All of a sudden, Andreas dashed forward, taking a swing at the Orc warrior, who had his hand forward as he tried to take a swing at Andreas as well, but was not able to neither see nor block Andreas's attack. From the commanders to the Orc Lord and his warriors, everybody was shocked to see what they just witnessed in those split seconds. Meanwhile, Luna was happy seeing her friend's strength. As he sheathed his sword, he said next, while the severed head flew in the air and the lifeless body started to fall down. Suddenly, another Orc warrior, with rage in his eyes, took a big swing towards Andreas, but was left in a state of surprise as he looked up to see Andreas mid-air after dodging his attack with a backflip. Abruptly, Andreas swung his sword down, piercing the Orc warrior straight from his mouth, resulting in instant death. In no time, Andreas had killed 4 of the Orc warriors, and the last one remaining was an Orc warrioress who slowly started to move towards Andreas while the Orc Lord stood still. Now it was her turn to face Andreas. She had just seen him slaughter the other 4 Orc warriors, but without showing any fear, she raised her weapon forward with anger in her face and determination in her eyes to avenge the other warriors while the Orc Lord stood still in amazement. Andreas asked the warriors if she was the last one, and without saying anything she dashed forward, launching an attack on Andreas while the Orc Lord, with his sword resting on the ground, watched everything patiently. The warrioress swung her weapon towards Andreas, who blocked her attack effortlessly with his sword, causing sparks to fly everywhere, while he gazed at her, admiring her strength. The commander grinned his teeth with excitement and a sense of victory, while Lena jumped happily, cheering her friend, yelling, "Amazing." All of a sudden, the vice commander asked who he was to defeat those Orc chieftains so easily, when they are like a knight to a normal human. The commander agreed to him and told he was fairly certain that the enemy had brought some of their strongest aura users as well. As the Orc warrioress and Andreas fought head-to-head, the commander exclaimed, "Barry Sanders," and asked if he could be an aura master, but he found it hard to believe that he might be one. Yet, for a man of which so little is known, and claimed him to be formidable, as he pierced his sword right through the warrioress's chest, taking her life and ending such a fierce battle. Looking at the corpse of the warrioress, Andreas exclaimed, "All done," while the soldiers in a state of shock exclaimed how it was unbelievable that he slayed all 6 chieftains, that too all by himself. As Andreas stood still watching the dead corpses of the chieftains around him, but soon was left in a state of surprise as he glanced sideways, hearing the Orc Lord laugh out loud, claiming how he surprised him. As they stood in front of each other, the Orc Lord praised Andreas, saying that was a fantastic battle, addressing him as an honorable warrior, and requested to let him hear his name. Looking at the tall and huge Orc Lord, Andreas trembled, thinking how he seemed tough, even more so than he expected, and introduced himself as Barry Sanders. Abruptly, he rested his humongous sword on the ground, creating a loud thud sound which amused Andreas. Resting his hand on the sword, he yelled, "My fearless Orcs," and told them to remember the bravery of this human warrior, Barry Sanders, for he gave their warriors an honorable end and eternal repose. Sheathing his sword, Andreas thought to himself how it scared him when he suddenly swung his sword downwards, but it seemed he was much more chill than he thought, and concluded that he thinks that he won't attack him to get revenge after that display. Glancing sideways towards Andreas, the Orc Lord told as promised, he would grant him a day's grace, and for they must also take a moment to honor the glorious deaths of our warriors. Getting back to his base, he waved his hand to Andreas, stating how at that time, he expected him to prepare himself to die with dignity. Watching the Orc Lord leave, Andreas, with a worried look on his eyes, exclaimed how anyone who cannot use aura would have immediately fainted from the sheer force of his fighting spirit. He concluded that this was what standing in the presence of an aura master in the battlefield feels like. He could feel it on his skin. If Andreas wanted to win against him, then there was no choice but to wait for the right moment. Meanwhile, in their camp, the vice commander addressed the commander as "Sir," and said that it was just too outrageous, and asked how they could not send reinforcements. He further said that all he could think was that Grandis had abandoned them. Abruptly, another subordinate told them they had dedicated their whole lives to defending the borders, and that was how they treated them, which was just too much. Suddenly, the commander yelled stop and told he would not tolerate any further insults to the kingdom, and no matter that, their mission remains the same, to protect the people of Endeavor and the kingdom from all the threats from the Great Forest. That is all they needed to think about. Hearing the commander defend the kingdom in such a dire situation amazed the vice commander and the other soldier. Turning towards Andreas, the commander addressed him as Barry Sanders and apologized to him for he had risked his life to buy them a day's grace, yet it was all for nothing. However, Andreas got lost in his own thoughts as he claimed the commander to be an excellent commander, because even against all odds, he managed to keep his men united and their morale high, and despite Grandis' terrible treatment, his loyalty remained such a waste of talent. Placing his hand forward and bowing to the commander with utmost respect, Andreas told it was all right as things inevitably happen when one least expects them in war, and just gaining the extra time to discuss their options like that was well worth it. The commander said he was most grateful for his understanding, and though it pained him to ask Andreas this, he asked Andreas if he would do him a favor for tomorrow's battles, to which Andreas accepted. He continued saying how they have lost many men at captain level to the guerrilla tactics of the Orcs in the past few months, and that was why he intended to concentrate all their forces to the West Gate, where they could deal with them head-on. But the North Gate, which would be thinly defended, is likely to be the target of a surprise attack by Orc chieftains, and regular soldiers won't be able to deal with them. Andreas exclaimed, understood, and requested to leave the North Gate to him. Meanwhile, Luna, with a surprised look on her face, asked, and told Luna wants to have some fun as well. The commander and the subordinate gave a nervous look on their face as they heard, have some fun, out of Luna's mind, and wondered how people said she had a few screws loose. Abruptly, with a serious look on his face, the commander addressed Luna Pendragon and asked if she could fight the Orc Lord. Her eyes glowed as she opened her mouth wide open with excitement as she exclaimed, wow, and told to leave it to Luna, for Luna will surely beat him. The commander asked them to forgive him, for they had put a heavy burden on the mercenaries, while Luna, raising her hand, exclaimed how her scythe will dance in the battle. The commander continued saying how, although he was ashamed to say it, even if it's beyond their abilities, they had no choice but to fight. That place might be insignificant to the kingdom, but to them, it was their birthplace, and if by God's will they survived, he promised to appeal to the king to ensure that he would be properly rewarded. With a serious look on his face, Andreas said he didn't have to trouble himself, for he was helping them out for personal reasons, as he lost his family to the Orcs when he was young. Hearing that, Luna was shocked as she addressed Andreas as buddy and asked if he had such a past. Meanwhile, Andreas was in his own thoughts, where he concluded that he needed to end this war and get to the Great Forest as soon as possible, and he had no time to deal with the merits or rewards from the kingdom. The commander exclaimed, very well, and told them they should fill their bellies and get plenty of rest for tomorrow. Meanwhile, in the tower were Andreas and Luna, who was shocked as she asked Andreas what he wanted Luna to do. Andreas exclaimed, that's right, and asked if she could do it. Meanwhile, Luna, looking outside the tower, told she had never done it before, but she probably can. Glancing back at Andreas, Luna, with a sense of joy in her face, asked if he was really that strong, to which Andreas agreed to, for he was sure of it when he was up close to him. And if he is in his best condition, he won't be able to defeat him, no matter what he does. Dancing with joy, Luna told that she couldn't wait anymore, while Andreas was left speechless, but called Luna, addressing her name, to which Luna glanced towards him, asking with him. With a serious look on his face, Andreas said that if the fight with the Orc Lord was to take an unexpected turn, she should go into hiding and wait until the corpses started piling up. Raising her hand, she agreed to Andreas, stating, okay, while Andreas continued saying when that happens, he would turn the tide of the war. As the sun rose, the next day came. The commander, in an attentive position, addressed Luna Pendragon, Barry Sanders, and said he would leave the west and north gates to them. Luna assured him, saying to leave it to them, while Andreas agreed to Luna and told he would head to the north gate then. Raising her finger, Luna said, wait a minute, buddy, which startled Andreas as he questioned with a yes. Suddenly, green aura started to flow all around her as she said that Luna will put a spirit seance on him. Andreas was left in a state of surprise. He thought to himself, Luna's spirit seance. And she can even summon souls with whatever abilities are needed depending on the situation. Concentrating a green flame-like aura on the palm of her hand, she started to chant and said, Ashimi, Trogundi, Husher, and put the spell she cast on Andreas. The green-like aura started to flow everywhere, and the force was so intense that their cape was flying while the commander stood still watching everything. Smiling, she pulled her hand backwards as she said how this should make the fight easier for Andreas, while his body started to glow and emit the same green aura. Suddenly, a system window popped up stating the soul of the warhound, Dwar, had been summoned. As his eyes glowed with the same green aura, he was left in a state of shock as he exclaimed, no way. Abruptly, another system window popped up stating the status will be boosted temporarily. Glancing towards the battlefield, he thought to himself how he could see everything that was happening on the battlefield. It had an incomparably greater range than a mana detect. Simultaneously, another system window popped up stating the Warhound Dwar as trait target tracking had been acquired temporarily. While Luna smiled with pride as she folded her hands, Both Commander and his subordinate were left in a state of shock as Andreas gazed toward her, thinking she even got the Summon Souls trait on top of boosted status with no side effects, and thought to himself, Luna Pendragon. What a cheat ability she had got. Abruptly, Andreas turned back with his eyes glowing green and told, "The enemy is coming." The commander was surprised seeing the power he had acquired because the battlefield was all covered in fog as one couldn't see anything, but soon the orcs began to growl and roar. A soldier from one of the towers yelled, "The enemy forces are heading straight for us." After hearing that, the commander shouted, "All men to your positions." Raising his hand, he called out archers and ordered them to ready their arrows. However, Luna was jumping, yelling, "It's a fight." Andreas stood still watching Luna jump with joy and called out Luna. Hearing her buddy call her, she turned back and asked back with a "yeah." As the battle was about to start, the orcs marched forward with their weapons while the archers drew their arrows, aiming at the orcs. Meanwhile, the Orc Lord, with a murderous look on his eyes, also appeared on the battlefield. Seeing the situation grow intense, Andreas told Luna to please be safe. While the soldiers were shooting a large number of arrows at the orcs seemed to be unfazed by it as they were charging at them furiously. The soldiers were also doing everything to stop the orcs, as the one who was leading commanded the others to get the orcs before they reached the walls. But the orcs were relentless with their attacks. Some of them were preparing to throw balls of fire at the soldiers as they had some kind of catapult ready for it. Soon, huge fireballs started getting launched at the soldiers, which left them bewildered as they were not prepared for such an attack. The fireballs that the orc threw were so powerful that even the walls and buildings near the battlefield were getting heavily destroyed. But suddenly Luna stepped up in front of one huge fireball and used a powerful magic spell to defend the attack before it reached the walls where the soldiers were standing guard. The commander and the soldiers were in awe to see how Luna used a powerful magic spell, which worked perfectly. Luna, with both her hands raised up, had a joy on her face as she exclaimed there. Luna didn't just defend the attack with her magic spell, but she ruthlessly obliterated it into 100 small pieces so that it didn't reach the walls. Then after taking care of the fireball, Luna came back near the commander. But the commander, witnessing all of this, acknowledged Luna for doing a great job. Soon, the ferocious orcs had reached the near where Luna and others were standing guards. This left everyone scared for their life, as the orcs now were close to breaching the gate which was below them. But it didn't take the orcs much time to breach the gate. One of the soldiers loudly exclaimed that the west gate had been breached, as they were all scared, but they had no option but to fight. The commander, who witnessed the gate being breached, quickly glanced back at his soldiers and sternly commanded the squad 4 and 5 and all the infantry to fight along him to defend the gate. In the meantime, Luna, with a glow in her eyes, had a look of joy on her face as she looked back at the commander and told him that she was going to play a bit. But the commander, who had a look of surprise on his face, couldn't comprehend what Luna was talking about, so he asked her what she was going to do. Then the unpredictable Luna jumped off the wall, but this time she had taken out her weapon, which was glowing with powerful green flames around it. In the meantime, a large number of orc mages were all using different kinds of magic spells. Some of them were using fire to attack, while some of them were defending them from the incoming attacks. While the battle was going on, a few orc mages were all doing some kind of magic together, as they were all chanting a magic spell with a powerful red mana enveloping in between them. It seemed like the magic spell that they were performing had finally succeeded, as the red mana had enveloped all over the battlefield. The orcs, who already were ruthless before, looked even more ruthless and powerful now, with the help of the red mana that the orc mages used. It looked as if the red mana had suddenly awakened the hidden powers of the orcs. Witnessing the situation unfold, the vice commander had a worried look on his face as he thought to himself how the orcs were going berserk, and they had to do something to deal with that. Meanwhile, at the north wall gate, the battle between the orcs and Andreas was in an intense state as they were ruthlessly fighting each other with their weapons. Even the ones fighting at the north wall gate were affected by the red mana, so with increased power, the one fighting Andreas launched a powerful blow at him. But Andreas was quick to react to the attack as he swiftly jumped back to dodge the attack. He felt the change in power of the attack that the orc just launched. As he was trying his best to not fall back, he thought to himself that the magic spell used to make the orcs go berserk was the frenzification. While the orcs were all watching Andreas in a terrifying way, Andreas thought to himself how the magic spell which was used must be the work of the orc shaman, and he must get rid of the orc shaman as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, the battle between the orcs and Luna was also in an intense state. She was single-handedly slaughtering a large group of orcs who had breached the gate just a while back. The orcs were ferociously attacking her from all sides. But Luna, with the help of her weapon, was slaughtering them ruthlessly. She was swiftly moving around and killing each and everyone who were approaching her. The commander and his soldiers had finally reached the bottom of the wall, but he was amazed to witness how Luna was dealing with the orcs herself. The commander sternly told his soldiers that the orcs were climbing up the walls, but at the same time he was thinking to himself about the rumors being true about Luna being a monster. He further wondered how she looked innocent, but she was as strong as a platoon of royal knights. Meanwhile, Luna, who looked ever so happy, was prepared to launch another attack with her weapon at the orcs. But suddenly there was a huge sound of her weapon banging with another weapon. As she quickly moved back to safety, an orc who was holding a huge sword appeared in front of her. Luna quickly looked up at the one who appeared in front of her and said how he had blocked her attack. The one who blocked her attack was none other than the Orc Lord himself, as he slowly moved towards her, commanding all the other orcs to stand aside as he will be the one to handle her, but Luna still stood there confidently. Meanwhile, the commander and his soldiers all had a terrified look on their face witnessing the Orc Lord right in front of them. The commander in a loud voice informed all of the soldiers that the huge monster was the Orc Lord. But there was no change in Luna's expression. Instead of being scared of the Orc Lord, she had an excited look on her face as she told him that she was waiting for him. Hearing what Luna just said made the Orc Lord laugh. He called her a little warrior and told her that she was not doing bad, but then Luna replied to him how Luna planned to imprint his soul on her buddy, so Luna would try not to damage it. Without wasting any time, Luna swiftly jumped upside down and used her weapon to launch a powerful attack at the Orc Lord, but the Orc Lord calmly used his sword to block her attack. There was a sudden change in her expression as now she was looking more serious about the whole thing. She then told the Orc Lord that Luna will kill him without leaving a single scratch. Listening to what she said even brought a smirk on the Orc Lord's face. Instead of attacking the Orc Lord, she started slaughtering all the orcs who were around him. She then quickly moved past the orcs and appeared right in front of the Orc Lord. Watching this whole thing happen made the Orc Lord laugh as he told her how she had surprised him. As they were both fighting ruthlessly, the Orc Lord acknowledged her for using her flexibility and mana to overcome her weight disadvantage. She then quickly jumped back on top of a huge army of orcs, but the orcs had no idea how they were going to catch Luna. Luna was so quick with her attacks that she killed a few of the orcs so effortlessly. Even the Orc Lord had a smile on his face witnessing how Luna was fighting his orc army. She was still ruthlessly slaughtering the orcs one by one, but watching this made the Orc Lord laugh as he exclaimed, "What a joyous and glorious day it was." But then his expression suddenly changed. He looked ruthless as ever as he sternly told Luna that it was a pity that they were in the middle of a war and they should continue this in Valhalla. Luna, with a look of surprise, asked the Orc Lord where they were going and what was Valhalla. The Orc Lord was standing tall with his sword resting behind his back, but he was emitting so much power and aura that a huge surge of light was forming on top of the Orc Lord. The light that he was emitting was so powerful and unique that his own body was appearing on top of him. Watching this thing happen right in front of eyes brought an excited look on her face, but the soldiers who were standing behind her were shocked as they were not expecting this sort of power. The huge body of the Rock Lord that appeared looked as if it was ready to launch a powerful attack, but Luna didn't back away from fighting the huge body of the Orc Lord as she was swiftly running towards it at an incredible pace. Watching how bad the situation had gotten made the commander furiously yell at the soldiers. He furiously asked the soldiers why they were all standing around doing nothing and commanded them to charge at the Orc Lord right away. Trying to get the confidence of his soldiers up, the commander commanded the soldiers to protect Endeavor and further told them that they should not let these orc scum destroy their home. Listening to the commander brought a look of confidence in the soldiers' eyes as they looked like they were ready to do anything they could to protect Endeavor. The ground battle between the army of the orcs and the soldiers had finally begun. The soldiers were commanded to hold the ground, and they were doing that as much as they could. But in the meantime, the huge body of the Orc Lord was ready to launch a powerful attack at Luna with his sword. Looking at how big the sword and the intensity of the attack even made Luna scared as she had a terrified look on her face. The attack of the Orc Lord was so powerful that the impact of the attack brought purple sparks all around the battlefield. The commander also had a terrified look on his face watching the attack and was also worried about what had happened to Luna. But this time Luna couldn't defend or dodge the huge sword attack of the Orc Lord as the attack had badly injured her and even made her smash into a wall in a bad way. But she was still conscious, but she was slightly bleeding from her eyes. She laughed and thought to herself how beating the Orc Lord might be an impossible thing to do. As she was trying to do her best to get up from the ground, a huge burst of fire appeared in front of her, but she couldn't do anything but raise her weapon. Suddenly, the huge burst of fire was so powerful that it fully engulfed the place where Luna was trying to get up. In the meantime, at the north wall gate, the fight between the orcs and Andreas was still taking place. But it seemed like Andreas was taking care of it well. He kept his sword back and looked back at the soldier whose name was Barry Sanders and asked him if he was doing all right. Andreas was standing confidently, while the corpses of the soldiers and the orc were lying on the ground. He looked at the corpses of the orcs and thought to himself that the northern gate had been cleared somewhat. Suddenly, a system notification popped up which stated that the soul of the warhound, Dwar, observed the battlefield. Andreas had a green glow in his eyes, and with a worried manner he thought to himself how the situation on Luna's side wasn't looking good. Another system notification popped right after that, stating that 869 corpses had been detected. Reading this notification brought a sudden change in his expression, as he had now realized something which could be done with the corpses. Then, as blue light was slowly enveloping around him, he thought to himself how this was the time for it. He then raised both his hands and called the soldier, Barry Sanders, who was standing right behind him. Both the soldiers who were witnessing the blue light which was enveloping Andreas were shocked, as they were not expecting something like this to happen. With a serious look on his face, Andreas then asked the soldiers to please send all capable men at the northern gate to the western gate where Commander Dawson and his squad were fighting. One of the soldiers witnessed that the corpses were moving, so he, in a frightened way, quickly informed the other soldiers that the corpses were moving and asked them what was happening there. But at the same time, Andreas, with determination in his eyes, thought to himself how from that moment, that battlefield was his. Andreas stood in the battlefield, lifting his hand as a green aura spread out, growing with each moment. He felt his energy stretch across the field and whispered, "My mana covers this battlefield. Every soul that has fallen here is mine to command." On the battlefield, where orcs and others fought fiercely, a strange green aura began to surround the fallen. The orcs, still standing, paused, puzzled by the eerie glow. At the center of it all stood Andreas, casting a spell that made the dead stir, filling the air with unease. The dead orcs and fallen warriors began to rise, stirring panic among the living. The humans shouted in shock, "What's happening?" as fear swept across the battlefield. The commander shouted in terror, "The corpses, they're waking up." Across the battlefield, the fallen warriors began to rise, their bodies glowing with an eerie green aura. The warriors on the battlefield froze in shock before shouting, "It's a necromancer." Meanwhile, the revived orcs and warriors, now glowing with a strange aura, prepared to rejoin the fight. With a cold, unyielding gaze, Andreas commanded the risen corpses, "Wipe them out." The battle erupted as the revived corpses clashed with the remaining orcs on the battlefield. On the battlefield, the commander staggered, blood dripping from his eyes and mouth. He coughed painfully. The Orc Lord, his expression hard with determination, spoke, "You surprised me, human. But that was a mistake. You should have attacked me first, instead of protecting her." The commander, bleeding from every wound, stood protectively over Luna, who lay unconscious on the battlefield. Suddenly, the Orc Lord raised his weapon, roaring, "If you've chosen the human way, I'll honor it." His rage building, he charged forward, ready to strike the commander with all his might. The commander, feeling hopeless, whispered to the unconscious Luna, "Luna Pendragon, forgive me. I've tried everything." Before he could finish, someone suddenly appeared in front of him. The commander stared in surprise as Andreas appeared before him. With a calm expression, Andreas simply said, "Sorry for being late." The Orc Lord, both surprised and enraged, glared at Andreas and shouted, "Barry Sandrias." Andreas raised his hands, beginning to cast his magic. As he chanted, the dead corpses nearby slowly began to stir, revived by his dark power. With a calm expression, Andreas directed the revived corpses to attack. They surged forward, closing in on the Orc Lord with relentless force. Furious, the Orc Lord raised his weapon and shouted, "What a surprise! I never imagined someone with the strength of a swordsman like you would turn out to be a necromancer." In an instant, the Orc Lord unleashed a powerful strike toward the corpses raised by Andreas. The force of the attack sent the lifeless bodies flying through the air, scattering across the battlefield. Suddenly, the commander spoke from behind, calling out, "Barry Sanders." Andreas turned around, surprised to see him there. The commander coughed, his voice weak and strained. "As you can see, it's too late for me. His face was weary, filled with fear and resignation. Andreas studied the commander with a calm expression, thinking to himself, was he protecting Luna? Unlike Luna's injuries, the commander's wounds weren't something a simple potion could heal. With a determined look and a fierce smile, the commander shouted, "Use my body. Use it to fight those who threaten Endeavor. This way, I can protect my homeland with my own hands." Andreas stood still, his eyes closing as he remained calm, taking in the commander's words. Suddenly, a fellow warrior dashed toward him, shouting, "Commander, you need healing now." The commander gently replied, "Tell Filion, I'm handing over the command of Endeavor to him." The commander's words hit the fellow warrior hard, and tears began to fall from his eyes as he looked at his leader with sorrow. Without wasting a moment, the Orc Lord went into a rage, shouting, "Barysandras, do you really think these weak, fleshy armies can defeat me?" The Orc Lord swung his weapon with fury, sending powerful slashes through the air. The force of the attack tore through the army of revived orcs, wiping them out in an instant. Andreas glanced at the Orc Lord, thinking to himself, "As I thought, ordinary undead are no match for him." Behind him, the commander and the fellow warriors stood, quietly talking to each other. Andreas continued to think, it looks like it'll be tough against the orcs with their frenzy still raging. In that case, Andreas began casting summoning magic, calling forth his undead to join the battle. Meanwhile, the Orc Lord didn't relent, continuing his rampage and unleashing powerful slashes. Soon, Andreas' undead armies began to rise. He commanded, "Timer, Nickel, hold off the Orc Lord. Rudo, Millline, wipe out the remaining orcs." With a determined and confident look, Andreas spoke calmly, "Go." The battlefield was thick with dust and smoke, the air heavy from the clash between the warriors and the orcs. Amid the chaos, a calm voice rose, commanding the dead enemies to rise as allies. Commander Filion watched over the battlefield, his gaze steady. He spoke, "I knew a necromancer would be a force to reckon with, but to see one person so powerful that he could turn the tide of battle. Look at the undead he summoned." In the distance, a giant undead swung its sword, cutting down the orcs with ease. Commander Filion and the warriors beside him watched in disbelief as the undead fought. One of the warriors, eyes wide with surprise, said, "Each of them is unbelievably strong." Commander Filion nodded, his voice filled with awe. "Indeed, it's as unbelievable as a dream." On the battlefield, Timer and Nickel moved with incredible speed, cutting through the orcs. Commander Filion watched in amazement and said, "To think that just two undead can completely hold off an Aura Master." Suddenly, a terrified voice called out, "Deputy Commander Filion." The commander and the warriors beside him turned, looking back in concern. "What's wrong?" Filion asked. A fellow warrior from the battlefield arrived carrying Luna on his back. His voice broke with fear and sorrow as he cried out, "Commander Dawson, he's been killed in action." Upon hearing those words, a cold, eerie silence swept over the area where the commander and the others stood. The air grew still, heavy with a chilling tension. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, Timer went on a rampage. With a fierce roar, he launched a powerful attack at the orcs, sending them crashing to the ground. The Orc Lord stood frozen for a moment, his face twisted in surprise and anger, staring in stunned silence. With a growl, the Orc Lord exclaimed, "What a string of surprises! Who would have thought mere corpses could hold me back? It seems my warriors have been wiped out." The Orc Lord stood tall, continuing, "I let many of my proud warriors fall on my zeal as a fighter." Meanwhile, Nickel, Timer, and the other undead readied themselves, preparing for the next clash. The Orc Lord glanced at Andreas and said, "Well done, Barysandras." On the other side, Andreas began to step forward, moving steadily toward the Orc Lord. The Orc Lord let out a heavy sigh, a smile curling on his face as he looked at Andreas. "Great warrior," he said, "this is my final battle. Will you let me die as a warrior by your sword?" With a determined look, Andreas slowly drew his sword and replied, "Just as you did." With a powerful aura surrounding him, Andreas raised his sword and said, "I will honor you as you honored me." The Orc Lord, radiating his own fierce aura, looked slightly puzzled by the words. With a confident look, the Orc Lord prepared for battle, shouting, "Come, guide me to Valhalla." At that, Andreas launched himself into the attack, charging toward the Orc Lord. The battle between Andreas and the Orc Lord erupted. Andreas swung his bone sword at the Orc Lord, But the Orc Lord blocked it with his massive aura, then countered with a powerful sword strike. The slash cut deep into Andreas' right arm, the force so strong it tore through him. But despite the pain, Andreas quickly cast a spell, and a green aura began to emerge, healing his arm as the magic took hold. The Orc Lord turned his gaze back at Andreas, watching closely to see if his attack had landed. Suddenly, Andreas charged forward, launching his attack at the Orc Lord. In response, the Orc Lord swiftly countered, sending a powerful strike back at Andreas. The sword strikes clashed with such force that an explosion erupted, sending shockwaves through the air and leaving the ground shattered in the aftermath. The explosion was so intense that the shockwave reached Nickel, who was standing nearby. He was taken by surprise, feeling the force of the clash vibrate through the air. As the smoke from the clash cleared, it revealed that the Orc Lord's weapon had struck on the bone. The Orc Lord relentlessly pushed his sword forward, forcing Andreas to struggle, trying to hold it back with his bone shield, which he had summoned through his magic. Without hesitation, Andreas quickly cast another spell, Bone Armor. The bones from the ground began to cover his legs. As he focused, he thought to himself, one wrong move, and he'll cut me in half. The bone armor slowly spread, covering his chest and other parts of his body, forming a sturdy, protective layer. With a determined smile, the Orc Lord looked at the bone armor and said, "So you still got a few tricks left, huh?" As the bone armor finished covering every part of his body, Andreas thought to himself, "Facing an opponent as formidable as you, I'll have to use everything I've got." The armor was now fully formed, ready for the next move. With a fearless smile, the Orc Lord grinned and said, "My excitement grows." The Orc Lord, now fully enraged, growled with determination. "Come," he shouted, "you great warrior who will change the world. I'll have you join me in my final battle." Andreas leaped forward, swinging his sword with all his might as he charged toward the Orc Lord, launching a powerful attack. Andreas and the Orc Lord clashed their swords fearlessly, each strike echoing with raw power as they met head-on. With a fierce and intimidating look, Andreas relentlessly attacked the Orc Lord, while the Orc Lord, without hesitation or fear, countered with his own powerful strikes. With a triumphant laugh, the Orc Lord gathered all his strength for a final powerful strike. "Gah, to think I could face two such great warriors. I have no more regrets in life." Meanwhile, Andreas readied himself, channeling the magic within his sword, preparing for the decisive blow. At last, both warriors unleashed their final strikes at the same time, and the battlefield erupted in a massive explosion of fire and smoke, hiding everything in its wake. Suddenly, Filian's voice broke through the silence as he asked one of the fellow warriors, "So, where's the commander's body?" The fellow warrior sniffed, tears streaming down his face, and said, "The commander, he said he'd protect this land, even if he became undead."